Wonderful prayer. Cheryl has a gift for that. And we are blessed to hear those words. My name is Byron Kimmel, and it's my privilege to bring to you the second installment of I Wish My Dad. And as Jen mentioned, that Ramal is going to be here July 2nd. Dan will deliver the message next week. If you haven't had an opportunity to pick that book up, I encourage you to do that. I'm about halfway through it. It's formatted with 17 interviews of men who just answer the question, I wish my dad. And you get a plethora of different answers in it, and it really speaks to the heart of that relationship. Today's sermon, we're going to focus on the words of the Father. And I'm going to begin, if you don't mind, with a visualization of an event that took place probably 3,000 years ago. The entire court was pressed against the doorway of the king's bedroom. No one spoke. The air was still. Sorrow filled the hearts of those privileged enough to get the final look and glimpse of a mighty king. Young man stands next to the aging monarch, grasping his hand. The king, struggling to breathe, motions for the young man to lean over towards him. With trembling hands, the young man prepares his father's final words. And this is the King David of the Bible, passing the mantle off to his son Solomon. I want to look at the scripture in 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 9 and 10. If you have your Bibles with you, this is the word of the Lord. And you, my son Solomon, acknowledge the God of your father. Serve him with wholehearted devotion, with a willing mind. For the Lord searches every heart and understands every desire and every thought. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will reject you forever. Consider now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a house as the sanctuary. Be strong and do the work. This is the word of the Lord. You see that scene as David kind of passes the mantle off to his son Solomon, and charging him with the task of building the house of God. You can't help but imagine the pressure that Solomon had on him with that task. But David's words, be strong and do the work, provide some guidance for him. David's words impacted Solomon so much that many of those words you can find in the book of Proverbs, which Solomon has authored many of them. It's one of the most cherished books in the Old Testament. Solomon, at the time of writing the Proverbs, is now the monarch of a massive nation, the nation of Israel. He's expanded the borders of his father's empire, acquired tremendous wealth, and is known throughout the Mediterranean world for his wisdom. Imagine him sitting in his chambers with pen and parchment in hand, thinking about the words of his Father. The words of the Father give us gifts. And what exactly are those? The text today will give us 3 gifts from the words of our fathers. We're going to unpack the text in Proverbs chapter 3. So if you move over there with your Bibles, we're going to spend the rest of our time camped in the 3rd chapter, which is probably one of the more famous chapters in the book of Proverbs. We're going to look at verses 1 and 2. My son, and this is Solomon reminiscing, just thinking back to David speaking into his life. Do not forget my teaching. Keep my commands in your heart. For they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. The words of the Father give prosperity to your life. Let me say that again. The words of the Father give prosperity to your life. And Solomon, following the words of the Father, had prospered greatly, as I already mentioned, expanding the borders and building the magnificent temple of God. The kingdom had prospered. To illustrate this prospering, I'm going to use an analogy from farming. I come from a line of farmers, the Kimball side, and my mom's side, the Farley, were Kentucky tobacco farmers. So farming's in my blood, and I would like for my son Mason to come up for this illustration as we talk about the important aspects of what is called fertilizer. If I learn how to turn this mic on, I'm going to go to the other one. Where's the on switch on this thing? Okay, there you go. Test that out there. There you go. Okay, so Mason, let's say you're the plant, I'm the fertilizer, and there you can see, look at that one. We got Dr. Earth. What is the purpose of a fertilizer?
Well, the purpose of a fertilizer is it helps cultivate the plant to help it flourish and grow. Then that allows it to prolong the life and quality of the plant.
Okay, so the words of the Father, could it be like fertilizer? Prospering the life of their Son. Now, one of the books Mason and I both have read is called A Man's Search for Meaning, written by a Holocaust survivor by the name of Viktor Frankl. And in this book, Frankl talks about his experiences surviving not 1, not 2, but 3 different Nazi death camps. And his experiences there, in his work after the war, he develops what's called the theory of logotherapy. And it really can kind of be summarized in one kind of statement. And as Mason and I were talking about this book, this kind of came, and it seemed like it was appropriate to bring into this kind of sermon. And what exactly did Frankel come to the conclusion of in his book on what actually gets those people to not only survive, but somehow after the war they thrived? How do they pull that off?
Well, it takes a lot, that's for sure. It's for those people to survive, not only they have to believe that they can survive through all the midst and all the troubles and stuff. See, the people who lived versus the people who did not survive, the people who did not survive already believed that they were going to die because they looked at the image that they saw right in front of them. Okay, I'm starving. We are dealing with harsh weather conditions. We are being tortured every day. I'm not going to live through this. But Frankel's image was different. He saw the big picture. He saw what he wanted to see. He took the image that most survivors saw and he put it into his own. He said, I'm going to live through this. I want to tell my story. I want to make sure that people understand the message of this life. And the message is, how do I word this?
People who know what they live for live longer, happier, and more fulfilling lives than those who don't. Those were the words of Viktor Frankl. And what Mason said, the people that understood the purpose of their lives, that there's more to it than just wasting away in these Nazi death camps, that I have to tell this story, that attach themselves to that. They not only survived the death camps, but they prospered afterwards. And Viktor Frankl is a perfect example of that having that purpose in life really allows you to prosper in your life. Thank you. I put him a little more on the spot than what I told him. But Mason has the ability, when you put him in those situations, he speaks from the heart. And I was hoping that we draw that out, and we did. But Frankl was spot on when he talked about if you have this purpose in your life. And if you go back to what Solomon was told by David, he gave him the purpose, and that was to build the house of God. He charged him with that. This is what you are going to do. And Solomon went to great lengths to make that happen. So the words of the Father give prosperity to your life. The words of the Father give meaning to life, and Jesus gives us those words as well. In John chapter 10, verse 10, this is what I would call Jesus' mission statement. He says, "The thief comes only to steal, to kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to full." Some versions say it's abundantly. You see, Jesus comes along and provides us the opportunity to live life not only to the fullest here, but in eternity. That purpose that Frankl talked about, that gave life that ultimate meaning, is found through Him. The words of the Father give prosperity to your life. Let's move on to verses 3 and 4 from Solomon. It said, "Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. The words of the Father give you a good name. We're going to go back to farming for this next illustration. You know, Solomon was known throughout the biblical world for his wisdom. That was the good name that he had. We're going to use corn. Yes, corn in this next illustration. Did you know that corn is the number one cash crop in the United States? A $12.1 billion industry. About 60 years ago, farmers discovered a new method of harvesting corn called hybridization. The method involves a process called detasseling, but this called for a six-fold increase in farming in corn over the last 5 decades. I got a diagram of corn. This is probably the only time in a sermon you'll ever see a diagram of corn. At the top is the male tassel. And farmers have figured out if that tassel is removed, it will pollinate with the female. And the stalk will produce what's called seed corn. And it will produce it. It's much more vigilant against pests and drought, which here in the Midwest we do on occasion experience. To remove those tassels, farmers now have machines that can get about 70% of the tassels removed from the corn. For it to be productive, though, they need 99.7% of the tassels removed. So to get that other close to 30%, large commercial farms will hire thousands of high school and junior high kids to detassel corn. And as you can see a picture of that happy high school or junior high engaging in what's called detasseling corn. He's pulling out the tassel. Now, if you've ever done this job, some people in the first service, yes, I remember doing that. It's not the easiest job. It sounds easy. Hey, walk down this corn aisle and pull those tassels out. They don't tell you you start at 5:30 in the morning and each stalk is saturated with dew. You get completely soaked within minutes. Also, you better wear long sleeves because the corn stalks are quite itchy once they rub up against you. In fact, they can even cut you. And they don't tell you that some of the corn rows actually are almost a mile long. It's a tough job. But they have to get 99.7% of those tassels removed to be completely successful. Now, speaking of detasseling corn, this is one of the toughest jobs that I ever had. Now, I was 15 years old, and I was standing in front of a massive barn listening to a man giving instructions on how to detassel corn. This is the first job I ever had. Now, I had experience being on a farm. I grew up on a farm till about the age of 4. And in 1978, my dad unfortunately died of an unexpected massive heart attack. There's a picture of he and I on our farm. We did raise corn, although I did not detassel. I wasn't tall enough at that age. Somewhere that hat might exist. Don't think it would fit anymore. But my dad was 39 when he passed away. My sister was only 2. And my mother and I and my sister had to move and we had to sell the farm. So let's fast forward 12 years from that. Here I stand at this farm, and my dad, he had been a farmer all his life, so now I'm actually working on a farm. So Kevin goes on, he's explaining this, and we were to be placed in teams of 8. And each team had a crew leader. And the crew leader's job was to make sure the other members of the team weren't missing tassels. And usually crew members were people that had experience detasseling corn and had experience working for the family. They trusted them. And remember, this is my first time. So as Kevin finished giving us the instructions, Kevin was one of the owners of the farm, he told us that we would find out what team we would be placed in, and they did that by posting lists on the side of a barn. So you can imagine high school and junior high kids would want to be in teams with their friends, right? So as soon as he says that, there's a mad stampede to the barn to see who you're with. So it would have the 8 members of your crew, and then at the bottom would be the crew leader's name for that. So I go over to the barn wall, and everybody's looking, and I'm scanning the list of each team, and I cannot find my name. Finally, my best friend says, "Hey, there's your name. You're a crew leader." What? I've never even done this job. I don't even know what I'm doing. How can I be a crew leader? So I knew I made a mistake, or they made a mistake. So I went over to Kevin and I said, "Sir, my name is," I know who you are. "What? I know who you are." I was kind of taken aback by that. "Okay. You're wondering why you're a crew leader?" "Yeah." "Your dad." "What?" "Your dad is why you're a crew leader. See, when I was your age, I met a man named Dale Kimmel, who was a farmer. He took me to a Reds baseball game. He played basketball with me and my brothers. He was kind of a mentor. If you're anything like him, you'll be the best crew leader we have." And what Solomon's words were, they'll give you a good name. Father gives you a good name. So you can bet that I was going to be the best crew leader I could for that summer. I felt like Solomon. You're going to build the house of God. You have to live up to the name. The words of the Father give us a good name. There are gifts to us. Jesus tells a parable in the 25th chapter of Matthew, the parable of the bags of gold. Men are given investments, gold, and they are to invest it. And the one that goes out and brings back the most, Jesus responds in his famous words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." When I hear those words, they just penetrate your soul. That's what I want to hear when I'm in the presence of the Lord. And you know what? I'm pretty sure that's what my dad heard at age 39. Well done, good and faithful servant. The words of the Father are gifts. Finishing up the passage, Solomon provides one last gift. We pick it up in chapter 3, verse 5. 5 and 6 are often passages people commit to memory. If you go to Hobby Lobby, you'll see them on all kinds of art there. I actually have one of those in my study. And right above my computer are these words: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding in all your words. Sometimes it says acknowledge or submit to Him and He will make your paths straight. So the words of the Father will make your paths straight to Christ. So let me illustrate this for you. I'm a coach, and I coach cross country. And at the end of the season, the kids get kind of tired at running at the same venues. It's either the bike path or around Kyle Park. So I try to go to other places that we can run at fairly close. And one of the places we go to is called River Ridge. It's on Calumet Road over in West Milton. And it's land owned by the Catholic Church, and it's a retirement area for the priests. And we had our testing the waters. We had our first meeting there in their conference center. But overall, they have a lot of land and trails that we like to run at. For the first time, I told the kids about this, and I gave them the instructions. I said, listen, GPS will not work. If you put in River Ridge, it's not going to get you where we need to go. So I said, I'm going to give you the old school directions. And the old school directions involve landmarks. Well, I show up at the appropriate time to practice, and half the team isn't there. And then my phone starts to ding and says, Coach, we're lost. Did you use GPS? Yes. Too bad. I told you not to. The words of the Father will put you on the straight path to Christ. They lock in GPS. I told you not to use GPS. You use GPS, you drive around for 40 minutes. We had one group, one carload of kids that never made it. I mean, they toured the entire school district of West Milton looking for this place. A few years ago, I received this book in the mail. Picture of it up on the screen. It was my dad's. It came from my aunt. My dad's brother was a few years younger, and he died a few years ago, and she was going through some of his things, and she found this, and she thought it was his, but as she looked at it and looked at the handwriting, she realized it was my dad's. So she mailed it from Texas to Ohio, and she put a little note in it. Said, I want you to read this. This is very interesting. So this is something that was put out in the 60s, late 50s and early 1960s by an evangelist out of Lexington, Kentucky named Ford Philpott. Now I messed up the pronunciation of that. I called it Flippo because there are some people that they spell that and they say Flippo. So some people from Darke County, I know there's the Flippo families in Russia and Versailles. But I was corrected. Somebody actually heard in the first service him preach. And it's Ford Philpott. And as I was looking through this, I came to page 14. And there I kind of outlined what I'm looking at. And it says, tell why Christ is worthy of your trust. Didn't Solomon's words say trust in the Lord? David told him to trust in the Lord. So tell why Jesus Christ is worthy of your trust and how your life has found fulfillment in Him. And this is what my dad wrote. He is worthy of my trust because He died for me, that I might have life everlasting, and that I trust Him. He has taken over the guidance of my life and the happenings thereafter. The copyright of this book is 1959. My dad would have been 20 years old. Ironically, this was prepared in Asbury Theological Seminary, which is a Methodist seminary. And when I looked at that, my dad was speaking into my life through this book, through Kevin, and through other people that I've met. Granted, I was only 4 when he died. But in those 4 years, he poured so much love into me, and it lasted a lifetime. The words of the Father give us gifts. They offer us gifts. So I know some of you here are saying, oh yeah, that sounds great and everything, but you know what? I'm a father that's blessed with the quiver of all girls. So, I have a 2-year-old sister. My dad only had 2 years with her. But in the pictures that we have, he's constantly embracing that little girl. And as my sister grew up, and that void was there, and my mother didn't remarry till I was 22. So from 4 to 22, that's 18 years. My sister grew up also without a father. I had to step in. I watched over her and protected her. I was her biggest cheerleader. I walked her down the aisle when she was married. I had gotten my career as a teacher started. She was a poor college student. I sent her money. And why? It's because I know that's what my dad would have wanted me to do. That's what he would have done. I know some of you are sitting here and your dad was checked out. He just was checked out. He went to work, he came home, he plopped down in a lazy boy seat, put the paper up, and that was it.